Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about positive attitudes. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how did you deal with a software engineer in your team who you like for their positive attitude but feel is dragging down the productivity of the team? Well, let's just say that I usually deal with that in a manner that it actually got me fired at one point. Mm. Simply put, I expressed that there is a difference between having a positive attitude and bringing value to a company. And I said so in an environment which, let's just say, guys, that there are very different company cultures on different parts of the world, and you may not be accustomed to this depending on where you are, but in some regions of the world, mine included, it is more important to be liked than it is to produce value. And the reason being very simply because when you live in an extreme culture, any extreme culture, doesn't matter what it is, and the extreme, if you're not with the extreme, you're almost always a target. And in a company culture where everything is a good idea, where everything is positive all the time, the reality is, as I'd like to point, I've actually pointed that out, the reality is that the happiness and like positive energy and so forth, these are very valuable things, but that can only be sustained as long as things are going well. The problem is that it's for some people very difficult to accept that not every idea is a good idea, no matter how much positive energy you put into it. You can have the best intentions in the world and it will not change the fact that this is not producing the results that we want. And that is a position that automatically, as one of my old mentors used to say, he said, "I'm not negative. I'm simply pointing out that you have a hole in the boat. Like there is a problem here." And the problem with very, very positive people is that they are too stupid to understand that you are not being negative. You are trying to tell them about a problem. But positive people take any form of criticism as criticism in a personal manner. Like what they're basically saying is that there can be no objection to a good idea or a positive idea because it doesn't matter. The reality doesn't matter to some people. Reality is secondary to positive energy. And when you deal with such an individual, there is really only one thing for you to do, and that is to feel out the environment that you are in. And basically, I found there are two ways to deal with this. You can do the sneaky thing, or you can do the upfront and honest thing. If you do the upfront and honest thing, as I said, I will warn you, I have been fired for doing that. Quite literally, or let's just say it was a very contributing factor to that pattern. The story was to me, this problem was very simple. We had a software developer who had a lot of positive energies, probably the nicest guy I've ever worked with, but the reality was that he was consistently putting us in a position where he would schedule meetings for the entire team, hours on end, for code reviews, for mob coding, for discussions, for etc. etc. We were working in a small company, a small startup, and we had sharp deadlines. The reality was that the way he wanted to work was not sustainable for the output, and I didn't even have to say much in terms of that. It was objectively a problem because literally everybody in the team felt, when we did the quarterly reviews, felt that things were not moving as fast as they could. Everybody was complaining about the fact that we were not meeting our goals. The customers were not happy because we were also not meeting our goals towards them. Nothing was actually being delivered on time or up to specification. And he actually commented saying that I hope that doesn't change how we feel about this way of working. And I go, well, of course it has to, because you cannot, which is the criticism that a lot, I don't want to get political about it, but that is the criticisms where you cannot reshuffle resources endlessly towards people who may or may not be able to use them effectively. And that is the harsh reality that we were facing, where like this way of working was not sustainable. I said so. The company decided to keep this person and get rid. Well, basically asked me to move on, and I did. And it took. I think I left I was gone for 3 months before they had to close down the entire department. So he got fired. My coworkers, like, they had to basically resign, all of them, etc. Like, the whole thing collapsed basically, and I followed the company since then, and I can just say that it continues being the same problem. They cannot get out of the idea that positivity is not a substitute. What is it they say? There is no substitute for competence. I don't want to quote. Was it Ayn Rand? Is it? I can't remember. The Republican goddess. Anywho. That is the fundamental reality. And so when I have had people like that in my own team, when I am the person making decisions, as I said, the one part that you can do is to be overtly saying that this is not going to work. This is the way I like to deal with things, because I'm a big fan of giving people the benefit of doubt and trying to explain to people that in a rational way. We cannot invest this amount of time into this thing that you want us to do because it's disproportionate in terms of value we get out. That is because I like to do things. I want to shoot straight with people, and I want to be honest about things and so forth, which unfortunately has, as I said, caused me a lot of ache. The way that people usually does it, like if they want to cover their ass when they want to shoot things down, is that they put you in a position where you cannot win. This is what the vast majority of politicians or political strategies are around. It's the vast majority of what office politics is. It basically comes down to if you're doing things at a higher level. When you want something to die, you can kill it without saying a single word, and it's actually very simple. You just have to make it very difficult for people to achieve a goal. So if you have someone who has a really bad attitude or a positive attitude, but actually is reducing the productivity of the team, and you want to deal with that in a very sustainable fashion, all you have to say is that unfortunately we have a very short deadline now, because whenever they come, all you have to do is whenever they come with a desire to do things in a way that slows everybody else down, you simply have to put people in a position saying that their way of doing things will not fly. You don't have to actually tell them anything. You simply have to make it very uncomfortable to force them into such a situation. So an example would be if they say that they want to do more mob coding and so forth. What all you have to do is say that, yeah, you're absolutely support them. You outwards support them, but at the same time you make sure that everybody's very aware of that their stories that they are working on, they're high priority and they should get on with it, because it's very important that it gets done quickly. What you just did was that you said that it's perfectly fine for you to mob code, but I'm going to hold each and every one of you accountable to your individual task, which basically means that nobody's going to start mob coding with him or her on that person's task, or like they're not going to do that because they're going to prioritize saving their own skin. Basically fostering an environment where this idea is completely impossible. And you can do that for a lot of things. It's a horrible practice, but it will work. And the best thing, as I said, I think personally, is that you talk to this person. The reality is, on the other hand, as with my little story, some people do not want to see this. As I like to refer to it as an individual who doesn't care about outcome. It's the person. It is this sort of individual. They do not care. They care about the process. They care about the environment. They care about all of that stuff. They don't care about output. They are incapable of seeing that there is you're not meeting the goal, but that's not so important to them because they're so convinced that their positive outlook or like whatever ideas that they have is going to fly. I mean, that doesn't have to come from just people who had a positive attitude. It can come from anybody, but people who are that indoctrinated into a mindset that is not working, it's like trying to convince an atheist that God exists, or like vice versa. It's a matter of belief, basically. You're not going to be able to do it. So for me, it's, as I said, it's easier to simply have a straight up conversation with them, saying that we are like the performance is not where we need it to be. And if I can't have that conversation, as I said, there are ways to make to basically, as I've said in other videos, you can isolate an individual, put them in a position where the damage that they can do is almost completely zero, And in some cases you can even put them in a position where they're going to fire themselves if you need to get rid of them, which is a horrible practice, and I don't advocate doing it, but sometimes you're desperate and you have no other option. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I usually deal with positive attitude people is that I make it very clear that in my software teams, like, positive attitudes is a welcome thing, where you build everything on the foundation of, first and foremost, over communicate, trust your coworkers, but then comes results, and then comes fulfillment. Because if we are not delivering results, you cannot, I argue at the very least, because this is actually what happened in in that company I was in. The reality was that the positivity wears off when things are fucked up all the time. When things fail over and over and over, that person, no matter how positive they are, they can't breathe the positivity into everybody else who see that everything's just falling to shit. It's you can't you can't polish a turd to the point where people believe it's a diamond, and that is the reality. That's what positive attitude people in many cases seem to like. They as I said, they try to substitute competence and success for positivity, and that does not work long term. It might work temporarily, but it's a drop in a bucket in comparison to what's actually necessary, which is measurable success. And so that is a balancing act, because you don't want to have people who are just negative, because it's not about negativity, it is about producing results with and actually, positivity is great, but it can't be a substitute. You can't switch one for the other. And that's why I tell people I prefer to have an honest conversation with the software developer, and just as I would even if they didn't have a positive attitude, because the reality is that if I'm a tech lead or something like that, it is my job, and I make that very clear to everybody in my team, that we can be buddy, and I'd love to sit here and talk with you guys forever about coding things, because this is the sort of stuff I live for, but it's not a substitute for delivering on our deadlines. We are accountable for delivering results, and we will deliver results. And we are all going to help each other deliver results. We're a team, but we have to work as a unit. There's no slacking off on my watch whatsoever. As long as and that's all I ever ask from anybody I work with. If you bring your best, you try your best, and I see that you're contributing and so forth, I will do everything I can do to meet that investment. But the positivity and not being able to do all the other stuff, that's a no-go, even if you are the nicest person in the world. And if you can't have an honest conversation, you can always put people in positions where it's basically impossible for them to do any damage. It's the same thing you would do with someone who's completely incompetent, where you can put them on specific tasks where they're basically just wasting their time doing, or they're working on minor bugs or minor issues and so forth. Or, as I said, you can foster an environment where their ideas of which basically spreads, because usually these people, what they do is that they suck time from everybody else in order to facilitate the way they want to do things. And if you create a situation where everybody has to pick between being on team positive and maintaining their own sense of productivity and value towards the company, most people will prioritize their own situation above doing that thing, which basically means that no matter how many mob coding sessions that this person wants to invite everybody into, nobody's going to show up, because clock is ticking on their work. So that's a very vicious way of doing it, but if you look around, guys, you will see a lot of that going on, where on one side people smile and say this is a great idea, and then they do everything behind the curtains that they can to sabotage it without saying anything. Have a great day.